Welcome to the Holliman 2024 vacation video. It should be noted up front that this trip morphed quite a bit in the planning phase. Initially, I had planned to visit Florence, with a stopover in Rome because, well, why not? But then, over time, Bulgheri, Pisa, Verona, and finally Munich were added to the itinerary. There are no direct flights between Seattle and any major city in Italy. This made for an early start and a long day of travel. And of course, with our luck, our flight was delayed in Dallas, but that turned out to be not such a bad thing, as then we arrived mid-morning in Rome as opposed to early morning. When we arrived in Rome, we took a taxi from the airport to our hotel in the Monte neighborhood. It gave us a good view of the Italian graffiti along the way, as well as the crowds at the Colosseum. But, as will be a theme, our first stop was for lunch. After that, we discovered that we had brought a little bit of the Pacific Northwest weather to Rome. Being from the Pacific Northwest, though, that did not deter us, and we walked nearly a mile to the Trevi Fountain. Though it's a spectacular sight, the area around the fountain itself was blocked off for renovations, so we were not able to get quite as close as we would have liked. After a brief refreshment, we then walked to the Pantheon, where despite the rain, we decided to enjoy the sights from the outside.
What do you want me to say? We're standing outside the Pantheon in Rome, Italy, and I was admiring the Corinthian columns.
We stopped for a brief snack before proceeding to the Piazza Farnese, near the French embassy, where we met up with our food tour. The food tour wasn't all meat, cheese, and potato pizza, though. After dark, we crossed the Tiber and skirted the Jewish ghetto in Rome, where we found stumbling stones, or Stoppelstein, small brass plaques embedded in the pavement in front of homes or buildings where Jewish residents were arrested and deported during World War II. Of course, Nicole was always on the lookout for the occasional bit of HVAC equipment. We spent most of our second day in Rome resting and getting used to the time change and wandering around the neighborhood where our hotel was. Finally, we settled down to a very good dinner with steak for me and seafood risotto for Nicole. And finally to the rooftop lounge of our hotel, where we enjoyed a bit of wine and the Roman skyline. My objective for day 3 in Rome was to visit the Protestant cemetery. Walking there, though, took us past the Colosseum. Neither of us were interested in battling the crowds, and we had not booked a tour, which was just as well, for the sheer size of the crowds set Nicole back a bit. I suspect that they would be much worse in the summertime. The weather this day, though, was clearer and warmer, nearly 70 degrees, so we stopped for lunch and refreshments before completing the 2-mile walk to the Protestant cemetery. I can't quite explain my fascination with the Protestant cemetery. Founded in 1714, the cemetery provides a burial place for non-Catholics, particularly Protestants, who were not permitted burial in consecrated Catholic ground. In addition to the English poets Keats and Shelley, there are a number of Americans also buried there, including Richard Henry Dana, who Dana Point was named after, the American lawyer, author, and abolitionist, perhaps best known for his memoir, 2 Years Before the Mast, published in 1840. And of course, there are many cats who roam the grounds and watch over things. Finally, we took a taxi to the Spanish Steps. I suspect that they, too, were much less crowded than in peak tourist season. What was your first impression of the Spanish Steps?
Too many people.
After Rome, we headed to Locanda dell'Ancino, a small B&B near Bibbona in the Bulgheri wine region. I found it online and wasn't quite sure what to expect, but their communication was clear. Don't trust Google Maps and you'll need a car. So we took the train to Pisa and picked up a rental. Locanda dell'Ancino far exceeded my expectations. When we arrived, we found the main building surrounded by a broad, manicured lawn opening onto the vineyards on a quiet, peaceful afternoon. Oh, look, there's my wife. They had an on-site restaurant, and that evening we enjoyed an excellent meal. We ate well and slept even better. Nicole took a reel of the rent-a-car the next day, and we headed to Bulgheri. She did a bit of tourist shopping there, and we grabbed a quick bite to eat. The town was charming, with a couple of narrow passageways and beautiful buildings, but it was clearly built around selling things to tourists. After lunch, we toured a small, family-run winery, Terra del Marquesato. The tour was brief, the operation smaller than what I'm used to seeing in Napa or Sonoma, but well-structured to sell wine to tourists, and we were happy to buy. After the tour, Nicole and I went looking for a snack, but it was riposo, and most places were closed. One spot, though, was open and busy. McDonald's. That's right, Mickey D's. It had the usual, Big Macs, Happy Meals, and a kids' play area, but also a few surprises, macaroons and tiramisu. The next day we drove to Pisa, dropped off our luggage and the car, and went in search for, you guessed it, lunch, which we managed to find without much effort. I was not a big advocate of visiting Pisa. Why go to Pisa? To see an example of nearly failed civil engineering? No. Still, from certain angles, the tower almost looks okay. But from other angles, I found myself thinking, wow, it's leaning a lot. Of course, there are tourists doing touristy things. We stayed in the Hotel Bologna, south of the Arno, but at night we wandered the back streets north of the Arno, which seemed unusually quiet. Maybe we were just there in the off-season. We encountered quite a few unique shops, friendly waiters, and of course, we tried the local pizza. But the highlight of the stay, after seeing just how far the tower really did lean, was walking the walls of Pisa, starting on the west side of the piazza with Pisa's own Jewish cemetery on the other side of the wall. It runs for about 2 miles and provides an interesting view of the seemingly prosperous areas to the north and east of the wall. Sights we encountered along the wall included a bit of local wildlife and, much to Nicole's delight, a roof full of train compressors. After our brief but sufficient stop in Pisa, we caught the train to the city I'd been looking forward to, Florence. We dropped our bags at the hotel just a few blocks from the train station and headed straight to the Central Market for lunch. Something about train travel always seems to work up an appetite in us. Afterwards, we wandered through the leather-scented streets just west of the market and then expanded our walk through the historic center of Florence. There, Nicole discovered a record shop, a bar where the bartender was clearly taking his craft very seriously. That evening, the hotel's concierge booked us a dinner reservation. I was pleased to see chicken liver pate on the menu. Always an automatic yes for me. It was a rich and satisfying meal. The next morning, Nicole wasn't feeling well, but with a quick house call from a local doctor, €160 well spent, she was up and ready. A good thing, too. I'd booked a private guide for the Galleria dell'Accademia to see Michelangelo's David, the centerpiece of this trip for me, and it did not disappoint. Indeed, it was much larger than I had expected, and more stunning. Afterward, I brought Nicole back to the hotel to rest. Fortunately, our friends Duncan and Elaine were also in town, so they kept me company that afternoon. Later that evening, we all enjoyed dinner together. The next morning, we met our guide at the hotel and walked to the Uffizi, where we spent a few hours immersed in Botticelli, Da Vinci, and the crowds. Our guide did a wonderful job of leading us through the bustle. Afterwards, we wandered through the Piazza del Duomo, home of Santa Maria del Fiore, and what felt like half of Europe. And then we ate again. For our last day in Florence, I booked something I knew Nicole would love, cooking school. When we arrived at school, we discovered that we were the only students there. Perfect. We started with a trip back to the Central Market to pick up some fresh supplies. Then it was aprons on. We made ragu, focaccia, pasta, ravioli, and tiramisu. Don't worry, I've sped up the footage a bit. No one wants to sit through 3 hours of cooking. And at the end of the course, we ate the fruits of our labor. They gave us a bottle of solid red table wine, so natural, we also drank. One of the late planning hiccups was Nicole's desire to visit Gardaland. After the train ride from Florence to Verona, we rushed to drop our baggage off at our hotel, then rushed back to the train station to catch a train to Pescara del Garda to satiate Nicole's amusement park cravings. That's right, we went to Gardaland. Imagine a theme park, very similar to a U.S. theme park, but everything from the branding, the characters, and the rides is just a little off. They also had a unique way of dispensing condiments, but I'll give it to them. Their fries were excellent. After a long walk back to the train station, we had a late dinner that was, well, it was okay, though the pizza was assembled a little sloppily. Our hotel in Verona turned out to be an unexpected treat. Before arriving, I had made a few calls to the front desk to sort out directions to Gardaland, and they seemed very understanding of my plight. When we finally checked in, we found the room was spotless and quiet. The door, though, was unlike anything I'd ever seen in a hotel. Thick, lock with 3 bolts, not one, and very heavy-duty hinges. It was clearly built for security, not decoration. With Gardaland behind us, it was time to actually see Verona. Most of our time was spent wandering the old city. Naturally, we trekked to Juliet's balcony. Tucked away in a courtyard, reached through a narrow, arched passageway. At the back of the courtyard was a statue of Juliet. Seemed to be a family attraction. Families would come, see the statue, and have their pictures taken. Whoa, what's this? Oh, what type of perversion is this? Even the kids are getting in on the act. Yep, that's it. And it didn't seem to be an isolated event. Indeed, it was quite popular to come and touch Juliet's breast. There's something about women bringing their boyfriends to touch a breast also. I had not anticipated this and found it endlessly fascinating. Having escaped from the spectacle of endless people touching Juliet's breast, we roamed the quiet streets in the neighborhood. On our last trip to Europe, I noticed young guys in a swanky Amsterdam neighborhood wearing Carhartt. Turns out, in Europe, Carhartt is less about rugged workwear and more about slim-cut urban streetwear. While Nicole shopped, I wandered into the public library. There I found a fascinating set of old card catalogs. They're probably not as efficient as a good online database. They held a nostalgic tactile charm. The reading rooms were also beautiful and quiet, a perfect place to pause and reflect. As we did elsewhere in Italy, we ate well. And drank well. Yeah. Take a look. Don't waste the face.
Cheers.
No, don't jump. On our last full day in Verona, at Nicole's suggestion, we visited the Castelvecchio Museum, a 14th century fortress turned museum. Beyond the expected armor and weaponry, there was also a substantial amount of religious art dominated by Christ as an infant and his crucifixion. It wasn't a celebration of his life or teachings. Instead, it seemed a window into the church's relentless fixation on his pain and suffering. I couldn't help but wonder what purpose that fixation served. By the end of our stay in Verona, I realized that I had enjoyed it far more than I expected. Next was Munich, a late addition to our itinerary. I hadn't been there before, and I wasn't thrilled about backtracking to Rome, so why not visit Munich? We took the train from Verona, a long but scenic ride through the Alps. Once in Munich, we did what we always seem to do first: find food. This time, a late lunch at Hochhaus. The food and beer were good, but as expected, the food was heavy. Later, we wandered through Old Town, where we stumbled into what, at first glance, looked like a riot or a protest. Turns out, it was just local football fans getting ready for a game. A few blocks away, though, the crowds thinned and it was quiet. I found a small traditional deli and sausage shop that immediately took me back to a little German deli that I used to frequent in Orange, California, Matterns. Eventually, we made our way back to our hotel and bed. And separate comforters? The next day, we wandered Munich with only one planned stop: Augustiner Keller. Along the way, I found a bit of German humor that didn't need translating. We wandered north of the central train station and spotted the Spaten Brewery. If there was a visitor center there, we didn't find it. We also noticed an odd thing: lots and lots of bicycles, but very few people actually riding them. Our main objective of the day was lunch at Augustiner Keller, a traditional German restaurant with a beer hall and a large outdoor beer garden. Since it was cold, I was glad we had a reservation inside. I can only imagine what the place is like during the summer, our Oktoberfest. Walking back towards Old Town, we started noticing an increasing amount of NFL paraphernalia. Flags, signs, they were clearly gearing up for something. One other thing that we noticed was that most of Munich's big beer halls served only a single brand of beer. For example, Augustiner Keller only serves Augustiner. With a little effort, though, you can find a few tap rooms and craft breweries tucked away, catering more to the locals than to the tourists. The next day, after a unique breakfast of Japanese souffle pancakes, we kept wandering the city on foot. As we neared the Hofbrauhaus, we finally figured out what was behind all the NFL signage. An American football exhibition game was coming up in a few days, and the city had embraced it. The flags and jerseys and banners, they were everywhere. The Hofbrauhaus was exactly what I expected: crowded and noisy. Still, the beer was good and plentiful, and the pretzel we ordered was the size of a steering wheel. Okay, maybe not that big, but it was huge. Before we left Munich, I wanted to visit the White Rose Resistance Group Memorial. The tribute is simple but powerful: ceramic replicas of the group's anti-Nazi leaflets scattered across the ground, as if dropped or blown by the wind. It evokes the moment immediately prior to their arrest, when Sophie Scholl is said to have thrown the group's final leaflets from a university balcony. Though the members of the White Rose were executed in 1943 by the Nazis, their words lived on, reprinted and airdropped over Germany by the Allies. And that wraps up our 2024 vacation. It was time to head home to the P&W and our dog Maisie.